Hello everyone! Last week we talked about the story of Ner'zhul, from him being deceived by Kil'Jaeden, all the way to the moment where Ner'zhul was tortured and given a new purpose by Kil'Jaeden. This week we're going to go back in time a few years before that moment, and we're going to talk about the story of Arthas, for these two characters would soon become very much connected. Let's begin, shall we? The moment young Prince Arthas is introduced into the storyline, he's at the age of 9, helping out at the Balnir farmstead. Yoren Balnir and his son Yerim, they're guiding one of their horses called Brightmane as she's giving birth, and the prince was right there to witness this miracle. You might say that sitting on the ground trying to soothe a horse as she's giving birth, that is no place for royalty, but Arthas liked to spend his time amongst the common people, something that made him beloved by all, and his father allowed it. As Brightmane's son came into the world, Arthas locked eyes and he immediately felt a connection. As disgusting as the miracle of birth had been, this very moment was pretty miraculous indeed. Just a few moments later, a horse rode up to the farm. Uther the Lightbringer had come to bring Arthas back to the palace. A rider from Southshore had brought ill news. Stormwind, at this time, it had fallen to the might of the first Orcish horde, and the survivors had come to Lordaeron to seek help. Anduin Lothar, champion of Stormwind, together with the mage Khadgar and even Prince Varian, who had survived the slaughter, they made their way to the capital city to discuss what to do next. Arthas wasn't allowed in on this meeting, but that didn't prevent the prince from hiding away on one of the balconies and listening in. Anduin Lothar told all present what had happened, that the orcs were a real threat to the world and that they had to unite. King Terenas, he showed compassion to young Prince Varian, and he agreed that they should gather the nobles and make their plans. After the meeting, Terenas left Varian in Arthas' care, and Arthas had a very hard time trying to think of something to say. What do you say to someone whose father was murdered by a friend? So the one thing that came to mind was telling Varian about the foal that he'd seen born today. Emotions flitted across Varian's face: offense, disbelief, gratitude, yearning, understanding. Suddenly, the brown eyes filled with tears, and Varian Rin cried, harsh, raking sounds of mourning for a father, a kingdom, a way of life that he hadn't been able to grieve until this moment. I hate winter, Varian sobbed. As the Alliance of Lordaeron formed together to fight against the Horde, Arthas grew close to the Varian, and he found out that Varian was already a skilled fighter, while Arthas simply sucked. He was frustrated about this fact, thinking that his new friend and the situation with the orcs, it would be a good enough reason to start training seriously, but instead the exact opposite happened. Any and all that could wield a sword were summoned to rise up and defend the land, so Arthas' training was put on hold, while the Alliance of Lordaeron, they managed to defeat the Horde and even capture their leader, Orgrim Doomhammer. Doomhammer was brought to the capital city to be placed as a prisoner within the Undercity, but he managed to break out only to be captured again. This time they decided to place him within one of the internment camps, these camps created to hold the orcs that surrendered after the first horde was defeated. The humans thought that this was a more humane alternative instead of outright executing the orcs, yet Doomhammer would not be caged and he broke out again. 2 years later, the Dark Portal reopened and the orcs returned for their second invasion, this time not to take the planet, this time they came to collect those powerful artifacts. 2 years and Arthas underwent a growth spurt. At the age of 11, he was a proper young man, yet his father still sheltered him and no real training was given. One day, Arthas found himself in the armory, where he and Varian, they had sparred together with wooden training swords when they were young. He picked up one of the swords and he advanced to one of the old suits of armor, imagining it was one of the foul orcs that dared to enter their lands. Think you pass here, foul orc? You are in Alliance lands. I will show you mercy this once. Be gone and never return. Ah, but orcs didn't surrender or honor, so Arthas lunged in as he had seen Varian do. Strike, block, duck in under the swing, bring in the sword all the way across the body, then whirl, and the sword seemed to take on a life of its own, and it flew across the room. Standing there was the dwarven ambassador Myrddin Bronzebeard, who had just witnessed the future king of Lordaeron pretend to fight orcs and throw his sword clear across the room. The dwarf was as embarrassed as Arthas was, so he asked the prince where he could find his father, and he quickly left him behind. Arthas had never been more embarrassed in his life. He didn't even bother to put away the wooden swords. This encounter, however, it did show Myrddin that Arthas was in desperate need of training, and after discussing it with King Terenas, Myrddin told the prince that he would become his teacher and he would teach Arthas all that he knew. But if at any time he would feel like he was wasting his time, like Arthas wasn't doing his best, the training would be over. Arthas couldn't believe that he would be trained by a dwarf, and not any dwarf, someone like Muradin. He was very excited to begin, but before they could get to the training, his attention was drawn by a young girl who had showed up as a guest. Young Jaina Proudmoore was on her way to Dalaran to study arts of magic, and the moment he saw her, Arthas knew that this girl was something special. She looked like she could be a great friend, someone to have fun with, a girl who didn't mind going for a swim on a hot day or being hit by a snowball in the face. He was excited to get to know her, but when he looked over at his father and Uther, he recognized the look and he knew that he would probably not even have time to see her again before she left. His training with Muradin also began, and it was as rigorous and demanding as the dwarf had warned. Uther and Taranis, they also decided it was time that the prince's training was stepped up in other areas. His schedule became very tight. He would rise before dawn, grab a quick breakfast, and then go on an early ride with Muradin. The ride would end in a hike, always leaving the prince winded. Back home, a quick bath, lessons in history, mathematics and calligraphy, a midday meal, then it was all afternoon in the chapel praying, meditating and discussing the nature of paladins and the rigorous disciplines they must observe. Dinner followed, and then Arthas stumbled into bed to sleep the dreamless sleep of the utterly exhausted. As he feared, there was little time to get to know Jaina Proudmoore, so the prince came up with a brilliant idea. He suggested to his father to escort Miss Proudmoore to Dalaran himself. His father was really pleased to see his son step up to the responsibilities. Jaina was also very happy, and Arthas got a chance to get out of his duties and spend some time with Jaina. This way, everyone was happy. On the way to Dalaran, Arthas and Jaina decided to sneak away as the guards were asleep, and they checked out one of the internment camps where they held the orcs. When they got close, Arthas saw nothing but monsters in the orcs, yet Jaina thought that they looked sad. She also noticed that they had children, and she wondered if they truly belonged in the camps. Arthas snorted and told her that they were killers, who knew what they would do once they were released. Jaina sighed softly, and they sneaked back to their camp to continue the journey in the morning, and finally reach Dalaran. Jaina was very excited to begin her studies. She felt the luckiest girl in the world, but Arthas, he had no affinity for magic, so he didn't feel at home. Outsiders weren't usually welcome in the first place, which Jaina thought was a shame, since she thought that it would be very nice to see Arthas again. As she spoke those words, she blushed, and for a moment Arthas forgot about the intimidation of the city, and he heartily agreed that it would be very nice to see Jaina Proudmoore again. Very nice indeed. For 3 years, Jaina did her thing in Dalaran, while Arthas focused on his own studies and training. At the age of 14, he was finally able to overcome his trainer and defeat Muradin. All the while, the training had been brutal. He had stubbornly refused any offers of healing, insisting that the pain was part of the process. And for that stubborn refusal, to whine or to quit, he was rewarded twofold. He learned well, and he won the respect of Muradin Bronzebeard.
How I miss those endless days in Lordaeron. Sharpening your skill with this dull blade. Forging you into a weapon meant to withstand the demands of a great destiny. Heh. You sure put them skills to use, didn't you, lad?
Now you might have wondered at the start of the video why I spent so much time talking about Arthas in the stable, about the moment that the fowl was born, but that's because the birth of that particular fowl would play a critical role in the rest of the prince's life. The horse was destined to belong to Arthas. He knew that from the moment that they locked eyes, and he was not going to be used for riding into battle. That was done by a completely different breed of horse. No, this one would be part of ceremonies and pleasure trips. He had toyed with names like Snowfall or Starlight, but in the end he decided to follow the informal tradition of Lordaeron Knights, and he gave his steed the name of Equality. Where Uther's mount was called Steadfast, his father's Courageous, Arthas had decided to go with Invincible. One afternoon, the prince found himself having some free time, as his father was away on a diplomatic mission to Stromgarde, and Uther had gone with him. Even with the winter chill in the air, and autumn's last glorious days were gone, Invincible and Arthas found themselves riding down the glades. Snow started falling, and the next part is so crucial, described in such a beautiful way. This is taken from the novel Arthas, Rise of the Lich King. It was starting to snow again now, not the soft fat flakes that drifted lazily down, but small hard crystals that stung. Arthas frowned and pressed on, a little further, then he would turn back, he told himself. He might even stop at the Balnir farm. Had it been a while since he'd been there, Jorim and Yarim would likely be interested to see the magnificent horse that the gawky little cult had grown into. The impulse, having struck, now demanded to be obeyed, and Arthas turned invincible with a subtle pressure from his left leg. The horse wheeled, obedient and completely in tune with his master's desires. The snow was picking up, tiny needles digging into his exposed skin, and Arthas pulled the cape up over his head for a little more protection. Invincible shook his head, his skin twitching as it did when he was being annoyed by insects in the summer. He galloped down the path, stretching his neck forward, enjoying the exertion every bit as much as Arthas. They were coming up on the jump soon, and shortly after that a warm stable for the steed and a hot mug of tea for his rider before they headed back to the palace. Arthas' face was starting to become numb with the cold, and his hands in their fine leather gloves weren't much better. He tightened his chilled hands over the reins, forcing his fingers to bend, and gathered himself as Invincible leaped. No, he reminded himself, flew! They flew over this jump like... Except they didn't fly. At the last minute, Arthas felt the hideous sensation of Invincible's rear hoof slipping away on the icy stone, and the horse flailed, neighing, his legs frantically trying to get a secure footing on thin air. Arthas' throat was suddenly raw, and he realized that he was screaming as Jack Stone, not smooth snow-encrusted grass, rushed up to meet him with lethal speed. He pulled hard on the reins, as if that could do something, as if anything could do something. The sound cut through his stupor, and he blinked his way back to consciousness with the bone-chilling shriek of a beast in agony clawing at his brain. He couldn't move at first, though his body spasmed of its own accord, trying to move towards the awful cries. Finally he was able to sit up. Pain shot through him, and he added his own gasp of agony to the hideous cacophony, and he realized he'd probably broken at least one rib, probably more. The snow had picked up, and was coming down hard and heavy now. He could barely see 3 feet in front of him. He shut out the pain, craning his neck, trying to find... Invincible. His eyes was drawn to movement, and the widening pool of crimson that melted the snow, that steamed in the cold. No, Arthas whispered and struggled to his feet. The world went black around the edges, and he almost lost consciousness again, but through sheer will hung on. Slowly, he made his way to the panicked animal, struggling against the pain and the diving wind and snow that threatened to knock him over. Invincible was churning up the bloodied snow with 2 powerful unharmed rear legs and 2 shattered forelegs. Arthas felt his stomach heave at the sight of the limbs, one so long and straight and clean and powerful, hang at odd angles as Invincible kept trying and failing to stand. Then the image was mercifully blurred by the snow and the rush of hot tears that spilled down his cheeks. He slugged towards his horse, sobbing, dropping to his knees beside the maddened animal and trying to do what? This was no scratch. To be quickly bound so that Invincible could lead to a warm stable and hot mash? Arthas reached for the animal's head, wanted to touch him, to calm him somehow, but Invincible was manic with agony. And he kept screaming. Help! There were priests and Sir Uther. Maybe they could heal. Pain, greater than physical, shot through the youth. The bishop had gone with his father to Stromgard, as had Uther. There might be priests in another village, but Arthas didn't know where, and with the storm... He shrank back from the animal, covering his ears and closing his eyes, sobbing so that his whole body shook. With the storm, he could never find a healer, before Invincible either died of his injuries or froze to death. Arthas wasn't even sure he could find the Balnir homestead, even though it could not be far. The world was white, everywhere, save where the dying horse, who had trusted him enough to leap off an icy embankment, lay churning up a steaming crimson pool. Arthas knew what he had to do, and he couldn't do it. He would never know how long he sat there, weeping, trying to shut out the sight and sound of his beloved horse in agony, until finally Invincible's struggle slowed. He lay in the snow, his sides heaving, his eyes rolling in torment. Arthas couldn't feel his face or limbs, but somehow he managed to move toward the beast. Every breath was agony, and he welcomed the pain. This was his fault. His fault. He took the great head in his lap, and for a brief, merciful moment, he wasn't sitting in the snow with a wounded beast, but sitting in a stable while a blood mare gave birth. For that moment, everything was all just beginning and not coming to the shocking, sickening, avoidable end. His tears fell on the horse's broad cheek. Invincible trembled, his brown eyes wide with now silent pain. Arthas removed his gloves and he ran his hand along the pink-grey muzzle, feeling the warmth of Invincible's breath against his hands. Then, slowly, he eased the horse's head from his lap, got to his feet and fumbled with the warmed hand for his sword. His feet sank in the red puddle of melted snow as he stood over the fallen animal. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm so sorry." Invincible regarded him calmly, trustingly, as if he somehow understood what was about to happen and the need for it. It was more than Arthas could bear, and for a moment tears again clouded his vision. He blinked them back hard. Arthas lifted the sword and brought it straight down. He did this right at least, pierced Invincible's great heart with a single strong blow from arms that should have been too chilled to do so. He felt the sword pierce skin, flesh, scrape against bone, and impale itself into the earth below. Invincible arced once, then shuddered and lay still. Yoram and Yarim found him there sometime later, after the snow had tapered off, curled up tightly against the cooling corpse of a once glorious animal brimming with life and energy. As the elder man bent to pick him up, Arthas cried out with pain. "Sorry, lad," Yoram said, his voice almost unbearably kind, "for hurting you, and for the accident." "Yes," Arthas said weakly, "the accident." He lost his footing. "And no wonder in this weather. That storm came on quickly. You're lucky you're alive. Come on, we'll get you inside and send someone to the palace." As he shifted in the farmer's strong grip, Arthas said, "Bury him? Here, so I can come visit?" Balnir exchanged glances with his son, then nodded. "Aye, of course. He was a noble steed." Arthas craned his neck to look at the body of the horse he had named Invincible. He would let them all think it was an accident, because he could not bear to tell anyone what he had done. And he made a vow then and there that if anyone else ever needed protection, that if sacrifices had to be made for the welfare of others, he would do it. Whatever it takes, he fought. This moment, unable to save Invincible, the vow to do whatever it takes to protect those that need it, to sacrifice whatever for the welfare of others, it changed the prince, and it played a huge part in the choices he made. What those choices are, we'll talk about next week, since I've been going on for long enough. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. Subscribe if you like my videos, leave a like if you enjoyed this one, and until next time, guys, see ya!